Hello, greetings. This is going to be sort of a Gorean topic, sort of a BDSM topic. So, basically, I'm making a video because I was watching a video on the Young Turks about a man in Missouri who had been arrested for having a sex slave for 6 years. And on the comments field, there was some debate where there were some BDSM lifestylers who supported this man. Now, the situation is this. Yes, this man has gotten into contact with a 16-year-old girl, started a BDSM relationship with her, then refused to let her go, forced her to sign a contract, and kept her as a slave and tortured her. And some lifestylers uh, put his arrest in the same category as the problem that you face the lifestyle these days with basically if the sub at any point in time cry rape, they will be believed and the dom will be arrested. However, I say this situation is very, very much different. Because, first of all, the girl in question is 16, or was when she started the relationship. A 16-year-old is not mature enough to enter into a, a lifelong TPE relationship. Just isn't. Secondly, uh, basically one of the posters I was discussing is said, oh, but so she wanted BDSM and yeah, this is the... No, that you want a bit of spanky butt doesn't mean that it's right for somebody to force you to sign a contract that is in no way, shape, or form legally binding and then keeping you as a slave. Now, there are really three issues here that needs to be addressed. One is the tendency within the lifestyle that if somebody at any point in time cry rape, it's almost automatically believed. There was this situation in Norway. It was basically a pair. They were edge players, and the sub and there were no coercion involved here. Basically, the sub girl wanted to be gagged, bound, and then have the dom do whatever he wanted with her until he was satisfied. She agreed to this. It was with full knowing consent. So he ties her up, he gags her, he does his thing, and at some point in the middle of it, she decides she doesn't want it anymore. And so she accuses him of rape, and he gets convicted. And I mean, some people within the Norwegian BDSM community, they were, oh, yeah, but that is right, see, you shouldn't play with gags. And I was like, no, this is completely wrong. This is completely bullshit. Because she has agreed to do this. And then if she at some point didn't want it anymore and she couldn't give that information, she has to take that on herself. She was the one that wanted to engage in an edgy activity. It's not his fault that he's doing what they have agreed to do. And there are situations like this popping up all over the BDSM community. Some that get arrested and sentenced for rape when doing things that the other person has consented to. Because a sub is then, of course, the one with the marks. I'm completely against that. However, in this situation, we have somebody who has engaged in a BDSM relationship, fine, and I don't know the, and I don't have a problem with her being 16-year-old and doing BDSM. I mean, I don't know what the legal age is in Missouri, but here is 16. I don't see there as a problem with 16-year-olds having sex. There's not where the problem lies. Problem is that he then refuses this girl to leave, forces her to sign this contract, and keeps her prisoner for 6 years. Here's a little thing about consent. If you are under coercion, it's not consent. if you don't know what it is you're consenting to, it isn't consent. Now, within BDSM, you have basically two slogans. One is SSC, safe, sane, consensual. The other is RAC, risk aware, consensual kink. I'm more of a RAC person myself because within safe, sane, consensual, has so much basically people say, oh, you can't have rough anal sex because it could be dangerous. I'm more into the if you want to take dangers with your life, go ahead as long as you know what you're doing. However, consensual is a big part of it. Consensual. And what this man did to this girl is not consensual. Never mind it being illegal. It's not consensual. And as such, it's a very big difference with that and with somebody who do a BDSM activity everybody has agreed to. Then the sub decides she didn't like it, and for with a gag or something like that, she couldn't. Uh, they didn't have a safe word, or they played with a gag, and so she couldn't tell him. And then suddenly he or she, the top party, is convicted of rape. That situation is very much different than the situation in Missouri. Now, the second issue that needs to be addressed. And here's where the Gorean connection comes in. It's the person I was arguing with. He said, "Oh, but they went to TPE." Yeah. Here's the point. At total power exchange, relationships still have to be consensual. And what happened to this girl? That she was basically held captive from she was 16 and then forced to sign a contract. That isn't consensuality. Now, me being quite a bit into you have being allowed to do whatever the fuck you want with your life. I do feel that it should be legal for somebody if they want to sign away their life to another person. Now it isn't legal, so that's really not the issue. We're not debating what is and isn't legal. The man was definitely in the wrong in a legal sense. But what I think should be legal is that if somebody is deemed to be sane and knowing what they're doing, that I should be allowed to sign their life away to somebody else for a complete and become their slave legally. I think they should be allowed to that. Just as I think that if somebody wants to play Russian roulette, they should be allowed to do that, as long as they do it in a place where a stray bullet can't hit a passerby. I feel that your life is your own, you should be allowed to do whatever you want with it, as long as you don't hurt anybody else in so doing. And I do know quite a few people into total power exchange relationships, including people who has been sold and so on and so forth, but it's still based on being consensual. Now, this guy also said that, oh, but what master with respect for himself would actually release a slave if she asked for it? Somebody who is not living in a fantasy cuckoo land. Hmm. Because here's the point, and I've been addressing this within the Gorean community before. Or rather, people who think Goreans keep slaves against their will. Who, in their right mind, would risk jail, risk their own freedom just to keep a slave? Now, total power exchange doesn't mean that somebody is kept past the point that they are consensual. Total power exchange means that within the confines of that relationship, they are total slaves. They are given complete control of their lives over to another person. Now within the Gorean lifestyle, it works like this most of the time. Basically, the slave is the complete property of the master. He has all the say in the relationship, and the slave has none. However, if the slave wants out of the relationship, what she do is she begs release. And I have really only heard of one time where that wasn't granted. That doesn't make the master any less of a master, it means that he respects the law. And also, since it's a lifestyle based on consent, on being consensual, basically how a TPE works, especially within the Gorean context, is this. The slave consensually becomes a slave and then she gives up her right to a choice for as long as she's in that relationship. But it is the boundaries of that relationship, so that when the slave is no longer consensually a part of that relationship, she's released. Now, do I think it should be possible to sign your life away permanently? Yeah, I do think that should be legal, because I think that having rights has no value unless you can do with those rights as you will. However, within the current legal situation, it's basically these things only work as long as everybody involved are consensual. And I also think that entering such a relationship, even if, let's say, the laws were completely different, that you could sign your life away completely in a TP relationship or a Gorean relationship and so on and so forth, that still would make it wrong what this guy did, because he forced her to sign that contract. She didn't consensually think about what she was doing and made a choice for herself. She was forced to it. That's something completely different. And yeah, as a Gorean who are into total power exchange, I see nothing wrong with it. I know that some BDSMers in Norway and so on, they go completely ballistic about TP. That, oh, it's so horrible, it's so immoral. I don't see anything immoral about being into TP, about somebody having a complete master and slave relationship. I do see something morally wrong with it if it's not consensual. That's really the one word that changes everything. And here's the point. I do have a big problem with people who enter into that Gorean or it be BDSM or any kind of such relationship. And they enter into the situation willingly and then cry rape when they don't enjoy it anymore, instead of waiting until the session is over, telling the dad, I really didn't like that, we need to do it differently. Or if they're in a total power exchange relationship and he doesn't and the master doesn't want to change, basically begging release and leaving. I feel that it is morally wrong to then cry rape, because they were part of it themselves. However, there's a very big difference between an adult entering into a relationship and then accepting the consequences for their actions there, and a 16-year-old girl wanting to play spanky butt and then being held captive for 6 years. There's where the difference is. And I feel it's very wrong for somebody in the BDSM community to support something like that. Because really what that tells me is, I think A is wrong. The telling somebody, basically accusing somebody of rape when you have willingly been a part of the BDSM relationship of it, and then applying that to everybody without even looking at the case. Saying, oh, but if there were ever BDSM involved and it turned to abuse, then of course it's the sub's fault. No, it doesn't work like that. One situation isn't the same as the rest, and here we basically have somebody who has never been involved in BDSM. He has just used it as an excuse to hold somebody captive. Now, for the third issue, I feel it's very wrong for BDSMers, Goreans, anybody on the DS side to support people like this man. because it really draws negative attention to our entire society. Now, Gorean suffers from this all the time because of all the misconceptions. I have made a video about that, basically. Myths and ideas people have about Goreans, like, no, actually, we don't kill our slaves, and so on and so forth. With BDSM too, there's so much rumors, so much misconceptions, and supporting people like this man just makes it worse. Because really, this isn't a situation where somebody has been playing, a session has gone wrong, and he is then accused of rape. This is a man who has lured in a 16-year-old child and held her captive for 6 years. That is something very, very different, and is not something anyone of a sane mind, whatever kinky nature you may have, should support and endow. So yeah, that is about what I have to say about this, and the reason why I've made this as a video instead of continuing the debate on that forum is that basically it gets very annoying to try to express myself in 500 characters or less. I tend to get long-winded, and it's just easier to just express all I have to say in a video and be done with it. So yeah, whether you're Gorean, you're a BDSMer, or anything along those lines, consensuality is key. Everybody involved should be consensual. It's like I said, I think that everything is fine. You can do whatever you want as long as everybody involved are consenting adults. In this case, one of the parties were not a consenting adult, and that makes the whole situation wrong. Hope you have a great day. Blessed be.